I remember going to my local Sainsbury's and sitting in the cafe, and I can't remember why I was there. And I was in the cafe, and I was in the queue actually buying a cup of tea, and there was a little lady next to me. I don't say little old lady, but she was very little and much older than me. And she was struggling because she bought a cup of tea and a cake, and she had her purse, and she couldn't find the right money, and she thought she'd bought the money, and she didn't have enough. And I turned round, and again, I'm not trying to just make myself sound good. And I was feeling very emotional that day. And I just said to the lady, "I'll buy you a cup of tea." And she's, "No, no, you can't," And I ended up buying her a cup of tea. And it was like it's like I'd kind of like just made not just her day, but her week. And she gave me a big hug, and with this moment I cried. And that was a little bit of light.
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way. Hey everyone, today we welcome Mark Pitcher, founder of Fit After 50. Mark's story is one of dreams, discoveries, heartache and resilience. Growing up by the Cornwall coast, Mark longed for the excitement of London. Unfulfilled by city life, he embarked on a global backpacking adventure. Though cut short, it led him to seize opportunities and find his niche in sales. A real people person with incredible counters, Mark thrived in a new company with grand ambitions, dedicating much of his career to its growth. However, tragedy struck, bringing unimaginable loss and pain to Mark and his family. This conversation is one of the most heartbreaking we've ever had. Yet, Mark's resilience shines through. He shares how he's used his experiences to support others facing similar challenges. Grief touches us all, but Mark's story of finding strength through devastation is remarkable, offering hope and perspective. Thank you for listening to Mark's powerful and moving story. All right, brilliant. Well, here we are. Welcome. We're delighted to be joined by Mark Pitcher today. Welcome to the There's Another Way podcast. Mark Pitcher, who is the founder of Fit After 50. How are you doing today, Mark?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm feeling good. And yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to reconnect. So just to set the scene, you and I worked together. We were just talking before we started recording. Over 6 years since you left Forth and 6 years since I left Forth, Mark. And that, obviously the world's changed a bit since we last worked together, but always enjoyed hearing your inspiring stories and our conversations. So it's great to reconnect again.
Yeah, likewise. And we sort of, our paths crossed for about, I don't know how long that period of time was, a couple of years, 18 months maybe.
Yeah.
And we always had great chats, and it's funny how the world works, how the universe can bring us back together now. So it's continue the conversation. So
it really is.
I can't imagine Pete having great chats. That sounds completely out there.
Well, you've been involved in quite a few of the most recent ones. So no, it's great to reconnect. And obviously we had a shared experience earlier this year, which we'll probably come on to in a little bit of time. But funnily enough, actually, Mark, I was in London yesterday for the first time in a little while. I went to meet some friends after work, and just getting back into the commute. It reminded me of the commute into London. We worked in Covent Garden, and then I went down to Embankment and got an Uber. And of course, then it reminded me of the marathon, just coming down the Embankment towards the end, and brought back lots of amazing memories. And you ran the marathon this year as well.
I did, yeah. First time running London Marathon, and no, it wasn't my first marathon, but it was first time running London, and yeah, it was quite an experience. Yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, was it? I mean, yeah, I think I've bored everyone to death with my tales of it, but it was an incredible experience.
All right, well, brilliant. Well, what we typically do is maybe just have a little look back, growing up, and I guess what inspired you to be where you are today, and any stories along the way, if that's okay, Mark. And at some point, we just learned before we came on air that you had your own podcast of 100 episodes, which is fantastic. So we're looking forward to hearing, yeah, a little bit about your background and what brought you to doing what you do today, and how anyone listening might be able to take some tips from what your company is doing today.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Where do you want me to start? Maybe
Big
I
old
should go
question.
backwards. Maybe I should go backwards. How did I get? I mean, honestly, if you'd said to me like as a young man, as a young guy, that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I probably wouldn't even known what it was. I mean, it's I think, it's a, a classic case of life's twists and turns, and there's an expression I quite like, which is zigzagging. I probably zigzagged through life. I didn't at a young age have this sort of burning desire to be any particular one thing.
Hmm.
Yes, now looking back with a bit of hindsight, a bit more wisdom, the common themes have been people.
Hmm.
I guess the common theme is people, actually. That's the common theme. And I guess if I'm probably, I'm happy to sort of, let's just dive straight into the meaty stuff, really. I think I'm probably the perfect blend. When I look at myself, it's always difficult to sort of analyze yourself, isn't it? But I am probably the blend of both my parents. My mum is a very generous lady. Always, she'd give you her last 10p. She's always
Hmm.
looking to help people, often to her own, detriment sometimes. And my dad's a very social guy, and very sort of has always sort of been quite good at communicating with people and such like. And I sort of inherited elements of both, and I think and yet was quite insecure when I was younger. And if I'm honest, probably, and I think it was an attention thing. I'm not a therapist, and a therapist will probably have a field day and probably say, well, you didn't get enough attention from your father or something like that. But I definitely sort of lacked confidence, and overcompensated by at times just being massively extrovert, and
Right.
talking to people. And I think that's where that came from. And then, there was no master plan. So to sort of keep it short and succinct, I sort of I grew up in Cornwall, sort of Plymouth, Southeast Cornwall area. Loved school, had great mates, loved the beach, loved the sea, still do. But both my parents had studied and worked in London when they were younger in the 60s. So London always had this slightly Dick Whittington-esque
Hmm.
sort of aura to it. It was always in conversation, when we were in London, when we lived in London, was always in our conversation in our house. So it was probably almost inevitable that when I got to sort of 18, I was destined, that was it. I wanted to go to the big city. So I went and, studied for a while, and then, got a job. And at that time of my life, the one thing that came out of that, and I'm trying to sort of skip over to spare people sort of every element, is I just decided there's more to, so first it was in Cornwall, like there's more than this. Got to London, thought there's more than this. And that manifested in terms of basically backpacking around the world with a mate, best mate, which we survived, still best mates.
Just quickly, Mark, sorry, before we go into the backpacking, was there a reason your parents moved from London to Cornwall?
Um, yeah, I think it's a good question, actually, and it's only sort of something that's come up more recently in our sort of family conversations. I think they just ultimately felt, they'd had me. So it's interesting that I was 18 months old when they moved from London, from
Right.
Southeast, up to Plymouth. And I just think it was a classic case of like, they're in a big city where they don't really have any family around them. They've got a new baby. I think my dad was, you know, it, finding it, he just passed some law exams. He was a lawyer. And I just think they felt, you know what, maybe we go back, be closer to the family, grow up with the grandparents, that kind of thing, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite contrasting environments, aren't they? London and Cornwall. Cornwall's beautiful, isn't it? A beautiful place to kind of grow up, and I can see the appeal from a new baby moving out to like you say, move to be with family. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it still happens to this day. You hear it quite a lot. People moving back to where they used to live or to where one of them used to live. So yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then backpacking, that sounds well. I mean, I did something similar, so I know how exciting that was. But you had a mate that wanted to do something similar, so you took the plunge.
Yeah, it was one of those classic sort of drunken evenings. There were five of us, and we all kind of put our hands in the middle and said, "Right, we're all gonna go around." And then two of us, one got a girlfriend, one got a good job. Can't remember the other one, and two of us ended up making it. And they were great, formative years. Went to sort of Australia, Southeast Asia. It's a fairly sort of, I guess, well-worn route these days, and went to East Africa, saw some amazing places, and it opened my eyes to the world a bit. And then, again, I mean, the plan was to go for a year. It was almost three. Um,
Wow.
Ended up back in the UK, and then thought, right, time to get a job. Had no
And-
money. Which took me to Mycross,
Oh
which then
yeah.
led me to Port. I'm giving you the very short version. Yeah.
Just quickly, when you got back, did you kind of get to a point where you'd had enough of being on the road and you fancied settling down again? We had this conversation the other day with someone who's just coming to that point now, about after about 20 years or something. So I got to that point as well. Do you kind of feel like you wanted some stability and?
I'd love to say yes. It took me two goes.
I did.
I when I was younger, I'm much better now, but I never used to know when to leave the party. Yeah, they always say always leave on a high. It's that moment where you go, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
And these days, well, I don't go to many parties these days, but I'm much better at kind of going, it's time to go home. But back then I wasn't. And with the backpacking, I kind of wanted it to go on forever. There was this sort of Peter Pan element to it. Like, this is just amazing. It's great fun. I came back because actually my father had a heart attack,
Oh right.
which he survived and is still alive to this day. He's 84 and still going strong. But he
Wow.
had a massive heart attack. And of course, this was pre-internet, pre-email,
Mm.
pre-mobiles. And I was in New Zealand and went up to the post office, and I'd received an aerogram, if you remember, anybody remembers those. A very brief aerogram from my stepmom, my dad's second time married, and saying your dad's had a heart attack. So I literally got the next flight back from Auckland to the UK. Got on a coach, ended up in Plymouth about whenever it was, 48 hours later, and thankfully he survived the heart attack. And at that point, I think because once I'd kind of seen my dad and I probably spent 3 to 6, well, it's about 6 months, and then everything was okay and he was recuperating well, and I just had it in my head. It was like unfinished business, like, right, well, now I'm going to go back to what I was doing because that was great. I had this sort of honeymoon period at home where seeing all my mates again, but that kind of very quickly
Mhm.
dissipated, and it was like, well, this is now a bit dull, and that was really exciting, so I want to go back there. So I saved a bit more money, but actually got myself a bit depressed, really. I kind of took far too long, dillied and dallied. And by the time I got back out to Thailand, which is where I went first, I kind of I kind of missed the boat, really. I was 3 years older than when I first left. Um, so I couldn't really relate to the young kids that were coming out and seeing it all for the first time. And, you know, I was too, and there was the guys the old hippies that had just been out there forever and never left. And I couldn't really relate to that. And then mates were coming out on holiday my sister came out on holiday, but then that was great. And then they went back, and I was just sort of like, what am I doing? If
Mm.
this isn't the same, I was 25 by this point. So, and I got myself into a little bit of a hole really. And at 25 years old, I phoned my mum from Bangkok and burst into tears and said, Mum, I want to come home.
Mm. Oh,
And it was only then, once I kind of got back and sorted myself out a bit, that I thought, yeah, bit of stability,
it,
time to earn some money. I'm ready for a challenge. And that's when so I started my career quite late, actually.
It's interesting. I think that period, that sort of early 20s to mid 20s, I think it's quite a challenging time for
Mm,
guys, because it's that we sort of don't really want to let go of the fun stuff. You kind of know that something's got to get serious, but I think also it can be quite an anxious time, because you're sort of trying to work yourself out and
mm.
figure out your place in the world a little bit.
Hugely. Yeah. Well, in fact, when I look back now, I think and it's even conversations I have with people now in their 20s, I think it's a really tricky time, mid 20s.
yeah.
Um, and I've got sons, my oldest boys are 22 and 21. In fact, one of them's graduating tomorrow, so I'm
Oh,
going to
wow.
Bristol. One's just graduated. So, and they're right in that spot where like uni's over, and now what?
Yeah.
And they're still in a good place. But yeah, I agree with you totally. Yeah,
It
very
gets
much.
real, doesn't it?
It gets real.
But we had this conversation the other day, but some people feel like there's a pressure to kind of do that, studying and then start work straight away. But the fact that you traveled and then you'd had exhausted it, it was cut short because of the illness of your dad. And then you went back and tried again. And then the realization that you maybe missed the boat a little bit. At least you'd exhausted it and you were ready to come back at that point, I guess.
Yeah, I think I was, and I definitely was. And again, you would. I wouldn't change a thing actually. And
Yeah.
as we all know now, sometimes your toughest moments at what seems at the time to be so difficult and tough teach you the greatest lessons. And yeah, probably wasn't how I would have chosen to come, but that's the way it played out, and it taught me a few things. And yeah.
Brilliant. And then that took you to Mycross.
Yeah, so Mycross, for anyone that is listening that doesn't know who Mycross are, is a hospitality tech company, big American company, as I remember it. And yeah, that was the sort of beginning of my, if I can call it, career. Really, I mean, it's sort of in business anyway.
Mm.
And it was a happy, like so many stories you hear, it was a happy accident. I was dossing on I'd sort of sorted myself out a bit back in the West Country, but come back up to London, ready to kind of really earn some money and make something of myself. I was dossing on a mate's floor in Slough, and he was working for Yellow Pages in Slough, and he said, "Well, why don't you just go down the high street and go in all the temp agencies?" So that's what I did, and I got a job filing for £5 an hour, putting files in filing cabinets at Micros,
Wow.
which became, and literally it was just, I could have been, and I literally it was for 2 weeks. It was for 2 weeks. And I was literally about to go, right, thanks, bye. And then on the last day, the finance director said, have you ever done credit control? I said, I think I said yes. I never
Yeah,
had.
I'm an expert.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Then of course there's no Google now. I'm thinking, what's credit control? Which is a bit another theme of my life, really. Just say yes and then work it out afterwards, really. So yeah,
Brilliant.
so I ended up doing credit control for them for about 3 months, and then it was that kind of ran its course. I think they got a proper person in. I think they realised I wasn't a natural. I was too nice to be a credit controller, and and again, which led to a conversation with the sales director, who was like, "What are you think?" Well, and I had mates. I was still in this post where I was still in contact with my mates from college, and quite a few of them were in sales. And my big motivation at that time was just to earn money. That was my, if you turn around to me at that time and say, what's your goal? I said, to earn money, to earn money. I had a couple of debts to pay off and from my traveling days. And they were all in sales and they were all sort of like, earning the commission. And they were saying, oh, you should go in sales, you get commission and stuff. It's really good. You get money really fast. And so I thought, oh, okay. So I sort of mentioned this in passing vaguely to the sales, not in those terms, but to the sales director. And he said, oh, you could do sales for us. And that was it. And 7 years later, I did 7 years at Micros in sales.
Wow, 7 years in sales. It's funny. Again, it's a thing we've heard before, where people have kind of navigated through their lives by saying yes to stuff, and it seems to open doors. I mean, you could have easily said, "Well, you know what, it's not for me." Gone back to temp agencies, and who knows where you would have ended up then. But yeah, you ended up staying there for 7 years. So that's really interesting. And then after the 7 years there, was that because again they say 7 years in human behavior is quite a significant milestone, isn't it? Because people kind of look for, I don't know, maybe something else, or maybe you come to the natural end of it then. And what was your next move after that?
Yeah, well, my next move was to Forth, and it's interesting you say that 7 years. I mean, 7 years these days is a long time, isn't it, to be in
Mm.
a job? And I think I'm quite old school. I was very much a product of that sort of like, loyalty and longevity. And that was, you don't want that was a good thing to have. These days people might go, oh, bit comfortable there, are you? Not very ambitious, maybe? Yeah. Time I was sort of like beavering away thinking this is going to be great for me, and I mean the next move changed my life, if I'm honest. And I it's only when you look back, and I don't dwell too much on these things because I should say, do you say yes? Do you say no? Do you turn left or turn right when you walk down the street? And so many of our things that happen to us, we can pinpoint to those moments. But um, I left the comfort of Micros, and I'll never say anything bad about it. It was a great apprenticeship and learning experience. I met some fantastic characters. Like all jobs for that length of time, it wasn't all sweetness and roses, but they were pretty good years, and I learned a ton of stuff. I jumped out of it to join what was a fledgling startup as employee number two, which became Fourth. It wasn't even called Fourth then.
Wow, I didn't know you were employee number two, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Hood was the sort of main guy, and
Mm.
was all the way through really, for the time that, well, you and I both know, and guided that business like unbelievably,
Mm.
through from start to, I was sort of, and if he's listening to this, which I hope he is, I mean, it's such an amazing. I owe him so much actually, on both on a personal level in terms of how he. I'll come to it later, maybe in the conversation, but I had a major life trauma, 2016, and how he kind of allowed me to sort of be around that was just unbelievable for any. I've never known anybody in a company sort of just give someone the space and the time. So he was a hugely bright guy, both emotionally and intellectually. But he also, in terms of business acumen, had the ability he could run a startup. He knew how to take a business from startup through all those phases of, you see business stories, don't you? And you have the guy like the founder who's like the big inspiration, who sort of, gets it going but can't take it to the next level. And then somebody else comes in, and then somebody else comes in. And Ben, took that business from like, five of us to whatever it was when I
Were
left.
you, and were you in a sales role there? Did you continue in sales?
Yeah, I was the sales guy, and they were all based in the Northwest. So the company, the original founders, Derek and Edwina Lilly, Edwina sadly no longer with us,
Mm.
family, who were the original sort of founders. It was Edwina's brainchild, the business. At that time when I joined, I mean, it was beyond an idea. They had a bit of software, but it was very early days, and they also had a magazine, which was the big sort of banner product, if you like, and they had a recruitment business. The recruitment business quickly they stopped that because it was kind of, from recollection, I think they were making. I mean, I can talk about numbers now because it's so long time ago, but I think it was, it was costing like 500,000 a month. It was making 500,000 a month, but costing 499 to run, kind of
Yeah.
almost scenario. And the software was always seen as, the big one, that was the ticket that was going to sort of send us to the moon. And in the end, it did, but it was a bumpy ride, and yeah, we nearly lost it a few times. But I was the sales guy, yeah, and I very quickly, um, not just me, but I remember sort of conversations with Ben saying, look, it can't just be me and you, we need people to build stuff, support stuff, deliver stuff. And we were making it literally, we were building it as we went along. But great people, serious business savvy, and you need a bit of luck. And we had a great product, and off we went, yeah.
It must have been quite a leap leaving a kind of. I mean, I can't remember which year you would have left, Mark, but it was a big company, Micros, and when you left to move to, like you say, a fledgling startup, so they must have believed in Ben and his idea at that point to make the leap.
Yeah, I did. And again, it's another sort of theme of my life. I tend to, despite, I was there a long time again, but I am capable of making these massive, seemingly massive jumps and just going, I'm taking the risk. I've got quite a, my attitude to risk is quite, I don't know what the word is, but, I have one. And it was exciting, and I was in my early 30s, and, I'd had a taste of corporate life, and no disrespect to Mike Ross, great company, great people, but I was, sat in a grey cubicle in Slough, and, it was getting to a point where I thought, again, back to that sort of, as an analogy, back to that sort of leaving Cornwall, going to London, there's more than this. And they just got me. In fact, it's almost embarrassing to mention it. I'd received a promotion at Micros, and shortly before that, and so I'd gone from sort of like debt and backpacking and having no money to having some money to suddenly having money at the end of the month left over, and they gave me a BMW. Silly them. And I remember getting in this BMW, and I sat in the car park outside the office in Slough, for about half an hour and pushing all the buttons on the CD changer, and I couldn't believe my luck. But I was still a young guy, and I was whizzing around in this BMW to my sales calls. I ended up getting nicked on the M4 for speeding, doing over 100, which I'm not proud of. And I actually got a 2-week driving ban. And it gave me, maybe it was a little bit longer than that. Maybe it was a month. And I had to sit on trains and get around, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect and read a lot. And I started thinking, it just gave me time to think that you don't get when you're sort of like always driving. It's a different sort of, different sort of state, isn't it? You're in a bit. And these guys just called me up, and again, I can say that now. They just called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to do this? We like you, and and they were clients of mine actually, because they had restaurants as well."
Right.
And they got me up. They sort of it was a bit of a ruse, I think. They wanted to come up and talk about the software, and then it was like, "Do you like to come up for dinner over here?" And we've built this thing. And of course, having been at Micros for 7 years, and Micros was completely out of touch now, but at the time it was the big sort of, its thing was, we are the market leaders, we are the Rolls Royce of the industry. And here was this like tiny, like, it was a fledgling thing, and they said we built some software, and it's on the internet, and it's it's on the World Wide Web, and what you do, right? It's called hosting, and you don't actually buy, and it's all that, and the internet. This was 2002, and even though people had computers at home, sorry, they had the internet at home, and people were starting to put their credit card details in, but it was Friends Reunited, it was Yahoo, Ask Jeeves. It was early days, and it wasn't fully embraced as a business tool, and there was still a lot of suspicion around it, and everything was about websites back then, and it just but it was new, it was exciting. And I rather cynically, got out my notepad and said, yes, of course I'll look at your software. And I remember thinking this won't, this will be interesting. And it blew me away. But not only did it blow me, it wasn't that, it was they blew me away. And I sat in a little booth in a restaurant in Manchester with this amazing lady, Edwina. And she sort of talked to me for 45 minutes about it, and I was sold after 5. And the combination of their passion and their business savvy, and it would just, I drove back down the motorway, and I knew, you make it I'd made the emotional decision on the M6 driving back, and I got back to London to my wife and said, that's it, I'm going to change, yeah.
Wow, that's really, again, like you said earlier on, the theme throughout your life is people, and it sounds like it's a people decision there as well, buying into the lovely people that you ended up working with for a long time. And I have to say, coming into Fourth when I did, which was a lot later than you, Mark, and I've met some amazing people in my career, but I don't think I've ever worked for a company that I just felt so in tune with in terms of the people when I got there. I can't remember how many people would have been there when I worked there, but I think at one point I started jotting down just these amazing coincidences with the people I was talking to. I couldn't believe it. I just never felt so warmly welcome to a company ever.
Oh, it's great to hear you say that. And I agree 1,000%. It was special. It was special. And sometimes you don't know how good it was until it's gone. But I kind of knew, even then, that's not true with Fourth. I knew how special it was. And again, a lot of that I credit Ben with, for building a fantastic culture. If you ask me to someone said to me, and I used to get asked, what was the secret to Fourth success? And if I was only allowed one word, I'd say the culture. We were all, for a very long period of time, and I say this without gripe or complaint, we were all underpaid. We were all on below market rate salaries, but we all were building something bigger than ourselves, and there was something special about it, and we kind of knew it. And everybody that joined, you could feel it. Yeah, you could feel it, and you clearly did. And there was something about it that just there was almost, nothing's guaranteed in life, but I just felt it's inevitable we were going to make it, because there was just such great people there. Yeah. Talented people as well.
It's amazing, that feeling. I was part of a company from 2012 for 8 years that was very similar. And I remember, I think when we met, you were at Fourth, right? And I remember how amazingly positive you were about the culture and the experience. And it's not often, actually, it's really refreshing when you meet people who actually talk about a corporate experience or a company experience that positively. It's quite rare, really. A lot of people are sort of, obviously the big movement, big part of the reason of the podcast is, you don't need to sit in your grey cubicle and slough. And it's fantastic when you stumble or you find your way into something like that at the right time, where the movement is going in the right direction. And I think, Mark, it's funny, isn't it, when you have that feeling that we're part of a mission here and we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. And sadly, we lost Edwina partway through that journey. But her spirit and vision sort of really, it was always there. Still, and I don't know now, but it definitely, she built something really special, and Ben and Sam and the guys continued it on, and Christian and all those guys continued it on. And yeah, it was, in fact, corporate wasn't a word that really got used much at Fourth. We never really saw ourselves as corporate. And that maybe that was part of it. Maybe that was part of the success. In fact, we were anything but really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work today with a lot of people that have kind of originated in that food and beverage environment and now kind of work in tech. I think there's still a big theme of that running through the people that I work with, and I think that's why people have stuck around quite a long time for that reason. So it's a bit different from a. I don't know. I used to walk past these boardroom tables in London. I don't know whether they're banks or whatever. I just think, wow, that looks super boring. We'd be having meetings in restaurants and bars, and and enjoying ourselves afterwards. It just felt like it continued that kind of food and beverage flair or flavor, but with, working kind of standard office hours and stuff. It's pretty special, I think.
Yeah, and look, I'm not. It's very easy to knock corporate as well,
Mm,
and we sort of paint it as the boring thing, and the entrepreneurial sort of, or whatever the antithesis of that is, the cool thing.
mm,
Um, and I wouldn't necessarily describe it in those sort of binary terms, but I think, or depict it that way. But I think what I observed was the bigger the business got, and the more corporate it got, I guess, over time, because I was there 2002 to 2017, so it was a long time. And what I observed was that, the bigger it got, some people that really suited. The more structure, the more process, the more clear boundaries, and that there are certain people that just like, yeah, they like that. They gravitate towards that. They feel more comfortable in that. They can perform better in that. Um, and others, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's like, no, they kind of like a little bit of the chaos, and they like it to be a bit more, creative and a bit off the wall, and maybe both are right. So some people leave because it's just the right time for them to leave. I left at a point I had slightly different reason, maybe for a different catalyst for leaving, but mine wasn't quite as simple as that. But there was definitely an element of me, and I'm being really honest here. I contributed my part to Fourth, and I did my bit, and each one of us had. It's like the classic team. You can say, well, we wouldn't be here without you, Simon, because you did this, and you wouldn't be here without you, Ben, and we wouldn't be here without you if it wasn't for you, Christian or Mark. So all these little things that built up over time. It was a great team. But I, reached a point maybe with it where I thought, I'm not sure I'm good enough. I'm not sure I'm the right person to, back to what I was saying earlier. I was cooperate really effectively when we were going from like 5 people to 500. But actually now, am I the right guy to be in the new environment? And maybe there's someone better than me, or someone who operates more effectively, or and knows this kind of environment better than me. So I was ready to sort of. Everyone has their moment where they go, yeah, now's the time.
mm.
And
Well,
or not, and they're still there, in which case they're thriving, or they're doing well there because they want to be there. So, yeah.
yeah, I think it's you hear often stories, don't you? I mean, as you started your own business, so you know a lot better than I do. But you hear of startup companies and then go from startup to a medium-sized company, and then it is quite a different beast, isn't it? I think for taking a business and growing it and scaling it. But from what you said there, Mark, Ben was there all the way through that journey, wasn't he? So for him to be able to take it from its initial incubated state to where he did was phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely was. It was.
It's very rare to hear. I was thinking when you said that, it's rare to hear stories of that. I mean, I think again, being transparent, it's sort of being able to be self-aware enough, isn't it, of your limitations and what you can and cannot do. And I'm going through a lot of this myself right now with my business. It's as CEO and founder of a company, it's 4 years old. I've got to sit here and say, either can I skill myself up, or can I, or do I bring in that skill around me? And I think, knowing that and being self-reflective enough and analytical enough to do that is rare. But to hear of a person who, basically carried it all the way through, I mean, absolutely fair play. That's, amazing achievement.
Oh yeah, yeah. The guy deserves all the credit. I mean,
But I
if I,
think, but I
yeah,
think, sorry to interrupt, but I think also credit to you, for obviously you touched on that there may have been a reason that accelerated you leaving, but I think also I don't think enough people have that self-awareness of like, am I the right guy for this role in this time? Is that my strength? And I don't think a lot of people do that.
yeah, look, I think again, it's always difficult. If I, There's loads of things I'm not very good at. One, I sort of pride myself slightly on being, I think I'm emotionally intelligent enough to sort of, I figure myself out. I'm pretty honest with myself, and I was being towards the end of my time there. It's almost like the way I'd put it is, you know, when I was growing the company and trying to do it things that how thought were right and the way to do them and get success and get results and the way I operated, that was, let's say I was talking Spanish and the new guys were coming in, they were talking Italian. I'm right at I'm kind of in sort of my sort of latter sort of period here. And I was like, either I'm going to have to learn a new language or, like, and some of my,
Yeah.
some of my Spanish was still all right, but you again, it's that moment you have to step and go, okay, I need to move with this. What got me, it's the classic thing, what got me here is not going to be good enough to take it forward.
Yeah,
So
I do like that phrase. What got you here won't get you there.
yeah. Um, but anyway, that's just the inevitable growth of businesses, and it's not good inherently good or bad. It's just that was my place. But to be honest, it I left them on fantastic terms, and won't have a bad word about them really. Yeah.
And when you left Forth, Mark, did you know what you were going to do next, or was it just take some time out and figure out the next move, or did you have an idea of what you're looking to do next?
Yeah, that's great. Um, I, if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, yeah, absolutely. I've got this great plan. I'm going to start a coaching business. But I look at it now, I go, no, I didn't have any idea. What I knew, if you'd given me a glass of wine in 2017 and asked me that and said, Mark, what do you really want to do? Come on, Mark, what do you really want to do? I would have said something like, I want to help people and I want to make an impact doing it. I want to do something that's meaningful and purposeful so that I'm going quite deep now, but that I can look back and go, hey, my life had a meaning. But that's as far as it went. I didn't really have much of an idea how I was going to do that until I discovered coaching. I found a course on LinkedIn or an advert I responded to on LinkedIn, and I'd been toying actually at my time. I was still at Forth at this point, and I'd been toying with um, studying Open University, doing a psychology degree. And I've always been fascinated by people and what makes people tick, and curious about that. Still am. But for one reason or another, still had a young family. It was going to be quite expensive. It was going to take a long time, and I thought, I don't know if it's the right time to do this. But it led me to coaching, which kind of has lots of elements of that. And I kind of never looked back really. I was sort of I went to the Holiday Inn on Gloucester Road, if you know it, sat in a room with 99 other people who were there to find out if they wanted to be coaches or not. Took the day off work, went along, sat in the front row in my suit, and similar to when I met, not in a different way, but parallel with meeting Edwina back in the day was, I was after, this amazing lady stood up, called Pam Lidford, who later became a coach. I hired her as a coach for me, and she just gave this sort of amazing talk for about 15 minutes about how she used to like hate her job and she was completely disillusioned. She discovered coaching and what it had done for her. She was a little bit older than me, amazing lady. And I was sold after 5 minutes. And I didn't even need the sales pitch in the afternoon where, they ask you for your credit card and all that stuff. I was just like, right, I'm in. This is definitely where I want to go.
And and
Yeah,
just yeah, no, fantastic. And
sorry,
obviously,
I've forgotten the question now.
no, it's great. And listen, I mean, I'm sitting here really sort of eagerly listening because, I think I just wanted to sort of tap in a little bit into terms of why do you think you got to this place? Because actually, funnily enough, I had a lunch today with a, I'm also in IT to some extent, and one of the things I said that starting a business is great, but it's still within that sector, and obviously part of this podcast is to explore some stuff outside of that, like you mentioned, with the mission and purpose. But what do you think sort of got you to that place? Did you sort of maybe feel, and again, this is in no way any disrespect to any companies or the great services they provide or cultures that they build, but what do you think got you to that point where you're like, what, I need more?
Well, that there's one very simple answer to that, and um, whatever I was thinking at that point around sort of 2015, 16 about where I wanted to go next, and we were coming up for a sort of a buyout, exit, which well, not an exit, but a management buyout, and sorry, can't get my words out. Acquisition, sorry. And you can tell I've been out of that for a while. And it was giving me, even though I was thinking a lot about that, very sadly, in July 2016, I stepped out of my house one morning to go to work, took a phone call to find that my eldest son had just taken his own life. My eldest son, Charlie. And I think, I'm not sure if you knew that, Pete. I think it's certainly not a secret. And I've talked about it publicly many times, but and that was, I don't have to say, that was just such a bomb going off in our family, such a sad, tragic event, which, always will be. And I, to not, and I don't want to make the whole podcast about this, but, when I came, I was in shock for probably several months, actually, complete shock when I look back now, probably I just didn't know where I was. And I almost don't quite know how we all held it together, but we lost Charlie and it was out of the blue. We didn't expect it. There was no history at the time of from Charlie of sort of any particular sort of mental illness. Looking back now, I can see with the education and knowledge I've had around mental health and other things these things I could think, yeah, that was a moment, that was a conversation, but we didn't know. And we lost him. And I then had some big decisions to make. Well, I probably had one decision to make, and it was literally, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, no problem, Mark.
Yeah, but it was just like, what the fuck, what's life about now? So all this kind of like live the dream, earn the money, buy the house in Spain, finally kind of live life on our terms, what we'd all been at forth, in our own different dreams maybe, but all been aiming for, had happened. But what was the point of it? Because if Charlie wasn't here, and I had to just decide. I guess it's that I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to become a victim to it. And I thought, right, I've got some choices to make here, and I just threw myself. Everything became about meaning and purpose and making a difference, and partly honoring Charlie through that. But just, doing something that, again, no disrespect to Forth or anybody, it just lost its meaning, really. And I think I might have said to Ben at one point, look, I can't sit in a meeting or sit across the table and look you or anybody in the eye and say, this is the most important thing right now, this month, this quarter, this thing, because, it's just not for me right now. So that kind of acted as a massive catalyst. I did come back, and Ben, to the business. Ben, that was what I was referring to earlier. Ben gave me all the time in the space when he didn't have to. He would have, if he played it by the book, probably, bereavement leave or whatever it was at the time would have been, quickly used up, and there was no pressure to come back. But he let me come back on my own terms, and I felt an enormous loyalty to him to do that, and to the business, which had been so good to me. And I tried to sort of make it work with a slightly different role, but it wasn't really working. I don't think it was working for Forth. It wasn't working for me, and I just needed to go and do this thing. So it wasn't like yeah. So from selling technology to creating a coaching business is it's a slight tangent, but that's what it was. And it was like, God damn it, this is what I'm going to do. So I literally went from Covent Garden, the offices that you knew, and everything that surrounded it, to my dining room table, a couple of books, and one client, and that was my next chapter, really. Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that, and for being open. Yeah, obviously yeah, I don't know what to say apart from, thank you for sharing. And again, I think, there's a lot of we were talking about this earlier, actually, with grief, and obviously I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to go too deep into it, or anything, but I think we were talking earlier about how we struggle to, in this country, I think, particularly talk about grief and that process. And yeah, obviously I can't imagine what that process must have been. But in terms of the message of, you didn't let it define you, you didn't let it uh stop you on a path. And obviously it changed very drastically, but yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a bit speechless, because obviously
Now, listen, I've just dropped a huge bomb in the podcast, and I listen. It is one of those subjects that it kind of, if you're not expecting it, it's a bit of a conversation stopper.
what's it's no
And
it, it
no, listen, and
absolutely,
by the way,
absolutely not.
first of all, by the way, I can talk about grief as all day long. It's not a taboo, and listen, we can move on from it. And I think that is in fact, case in point, it was about moving forward. So it wasn't, I'd probably sum it up by saying everyone has, grief is such a unique experience, and I would never tell anyone how to grieve. There's no textbook, there's no manual, and you you've probably, it's quite widely publicized now, there's a diagram with the sort of stages of grief, and it's shock, and then it's denial, and then it's anger, I think, is next, and then it's bargaining and acceptance and all this. And that's and I respect all forms of therapy, and I welcome it. But I could experience all five of those in one day. I mean, there's no, it's not a linear path. But look, I guess I'd sum it by saying, like, you never, it's not about moving on from it. You move forward with it. You don't get over something like that. It's not like, oh well, never mind. It's
Absolutely.
but you carry it with you, and that's what I do. And I carry Charlie with me, and some days it's heavier, and some days it's lighter, and I still do. And it kind of, all of this stuff that we're talking about, and grief can, like, my grief is one kind of grief. Other people might go through a relationship breakup, or get fired from their job, and they will grieve that. The grief is everywhere, and it doesn't have to be associated with bereavement. And sometimes the symptoms can be similar, and there's lots of parallel. When I look back now, I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually displaying signs of PTSD, in those early, well, for quite a while, actually. And it wasn't until I spoke to somebody that sort of, we pointed some things out and recognized it. I thought, and there's, you learn a lot about yourself, and I think the biggest thing of it is, how can I use this to help other people without I'm not trying to sound sanctimonious. I'm just one guy, in West London, doing my thing. And initially I thought it was coaching, as in life coaching. and it was a great ride. Well, and still is actually. I still coach people, but it kind of morphed more into fitness. I threw myself into fitness in an almost unhealthy, obsessive way initially, but then found my rhythm with it. I lost a ton of weight. I lost, 24 kilos. That's like 4 stone in old money, without even realizing I had that to lose. And it was it was COVID. I, COVID kind of, I sort of paused the coaching. I'd paused the podcasting. I'd paused the sort of the videos I'd been making on social media and such like. And it gave again time to reflect. And I was sort of in the gym one day thinking, I still want to help people. I still want to help people and make a difference. What do I love? And what am I good at? What have I been through that I could bring and use as a gift? And as I'm lifting these weights, I'm thinking, Mark, you're doing it. You're doing it. And fitness, even though it's the first time we've mentioned it in the podcast, has actually been a theme throughout my life. I've always been a runner. I've always run like half marathons and latterly marathons and fitness. And I thought, do you know what? I want to help other guys do this. So, that's when I started Fit After 50, and it sort of morphed into fitness. And actually the coaching I found actually plays a massive part in it because so much of it is mindset. It's not just about lifting weights and such like. So yeah, that's been that sort of the journey, if you like, and carrying Charlie with me. And I think the difference really, just to sort of lighten it, or probably for everyone, is that I think when I was doing my coaching business, it was part of the coaching business. I was almost grieving in public in a way, although you wouldn't have known it at the time because it was a very positive business. But it was part of that. I needed to do that. And Charlie and losing Charlie was very much, I would talk about it quite a lot. And it was almost like on page one of the book, if you know what I mean. And I just reached a point where I felt that, and this was very just personal, nothing anyone said to me. I thought, it doesn't need to be on page one anymore. And, it's lovely when people say things like, oh, that's really inspiring that you've lost your son and you're doing this great stuff. And that's great. But I didn't want it to dominate, and I didn't want sympathy. I genuinely wanted to help people. So these days it's on page 9. Do you know what I mean? It's there. And it's interesting, like, it's taken us it took us about 45 minutes for it even to come up in the podcast today, so it's like, it's probably, if we were doing this 5 years ago, I would probably have mentioned it much sooner. And that's probably just indicative of where I am at on my journey with it now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for sharing. And I mean, I guess what I find amazing is how quickly you seem to, and let's face it, in the most frankly extreme of circumstances, you quickly turned it into a giving and a helping mindset. I mean, do you think sort of do you think that was almost a bit of a coping mechanism? Do you think it was because obviously, let's face it, a lot of people with that situation would go under, and do you think it sort of it helped you as well, or
Oh, massively, massively. And you talk about going under, and I know people that, you know, have or are, I can easily see how people would turn to alcohol or drugs or religion, or, and I wouldn't judge them for it, because it is and I was in a very, very dark place. I'm not going to lie. Shortly after, those early months were very dark, so it's definitely helped me. I think I'd go back to, so here's the thing, actually. I know this was a conversation I was having with someone the other day. So sorry to keep talking about grief, but it what I noticed in my family is that grief exaggerated traits, existing traits that we all already had,
Mm.
member of the family. So if someone in the family had a bit of a quick temper, it exaggerated their temper. If someone was a bit sensitive, they became oversensitive. If someone was a bit um, very neat and tidy, they became overly, obsessively neat and tidy. All these things were, and it took me a while to work this out. But it became apparent that this was the case, and this was how sort of grief had like been this bomb that had gone off, and it was like the ripple effects of this. And out of respect to my wife, I'm not going to sort of go into too much sort of personal stuff about that, but it happened it affected, of course, our relationship and at that time, and how we interacted and my friendships, all sorts of things. But the reason I mention that is I'm going to go back to the very start of something I said at the beginning of the podcast, which is being a product of my mother and father. And that young boy who was watching his mother grow up, who, just thought, I just want to help people. I want to do good because that's a good thing. But at the same time, I think, I'll say it now, I love both my parents, but I didn't probably get enough attention from my father at that time. And so that I think I've always sought out situations where I'm very comfortable being front and center. I don't want to say the star of the show, but maybe a little bit. There's a little bit of ego there. Like, hey guys, I'm here. I've got something to say. I'm very comfortable. Bigger the crowd, the better. Very relaxed. Go back to sales. Why sales? Big rooms, big boardrooms. I know all of then it was about transforming the room from A to B to buy a product, but it's still about transforming a room, but it's not about buying a software product anymore. It's about, giving them some, transforming their health, and ultimately their life, and so that, like, kind of everybody look at me, everybody listen to me, I've got something, is definitely part of it. But always balanced with, it's got to help. Whatever I'm doing has to be real and it has to help. And I often think the best people to help are, who you were in the past. So I'm these days, in terms of my fitness business, my perfect profile client is me 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. That's who I'm, or maybe 7 to 10 years ago. That's who I'm kind of saying to. And so all the mistakes, all the failings, all the kind of doubts, thoughts, and the successes, but all of that is wrapped up in what I now offer, because I've, and I think it's a great place to come from, because you can't help but be authentic because you've lived it, so yeah. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
It really does. Well, I don't know how you even coped with that. I mean, it's just a horrendous situation to have to go through.
Yeah, look, thank you for saying that. And again, I appreciate I've just dropped a massive bomb in the podcast, and I'm very aware that when I talk about this, excuse me, some people, it can throw them, or people don't know what to say, and I don't think I would have known what to say, and it's a really difficult one. But I want to sort of, you have to take the positives from it. You
Mm.
and the positives in, July 2016, I couldn't really find any for a while. And then slowly but surely you find little positives, and they're in the most unexpected places. And in fact, I don't know if we've got time, because I'm really mindful of we've been talking for a while, but there would be, I can remember, and this was weeks after we lost Charlie. I remember going to my local Sainsbury's and sitting in the cafe, and I can't remember why I was there. And I was in the cafe, and I was in the queue actually buying a cup of tea, and there's a little lady next to me. I don't say little old lady, but she was very little and much older than me. and she was struggling because she bought a cup of tea and a cake, and she had her purse, and she couldn't find the right money, and she thought she'd bought the money, and she didn't have enough. And I turned round, and again, I'm not trying to just make myself sound good. And I was feeling very emotional that day. And I just said to the lady, "I'll buy you a cup of tea." And she's, "No, no, you can't," And I ended up buying her a cup of tea. And it was like it's like I'd kind of like just made not just her day, but her week. And she wouldn't leave me alone. And then we got chatting, and I was asking about her life, which led to me saying, I said, "Look, I've just lost my son, and I'm just sitting here because I want to get out of the house, basically, and I don't really know." And she gave me a big hug, and with this moment, I cried, and that was a little bit of light. And it starts with little things like that. And I was able to come home that day and go, for the first time, "Do you know what happened today? I went to Sainsbury's," and and you go, "Oh, there's a little bit of light." And then all sorts of amazing things. And I will probably start crying, if I talk about them too much. But there are, one of Charlie's friends who's now my friend. He calls me you're my Mark, you're my oldest mate. Charlie used to like Arsenal, and he wrote to Arsenal, told them about Charlie, and I got a letter back from signed. It's on my wall behind me, actually, signed by Arsene Wenger, offering his condolences. And like he didn't have to do that, and this was an 18-year-old kid, and that just beautiful little things that just, and other people have done things, said things, done things in his name, um, all of which, none of which would have happened if we hadn't. So he's almost, look, I'd have him back in a heartbeat, but through what happened, it's created some beautiful moments and beautiful things. And there are things that fit after 50 wouldn't be in existence now if it wasn't, so somebody somewhere has benefited from my business, and their health has benefited, and that wouldn't have done if it wasn't for Charlie. That I kind of link it back to that. So it's yeah. And if you look at my Instagram, you won't find any mention of any of this stuff we're talking about, but it's real, and it's me, and it's part of it's my truth, Yeah.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for sharing. And I think, for me, obviously with two kids, I think everyone thinks they're pretty bulletproof, or people, you try and be, you do the work, and you try and work on your sort of inner self. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but one of the things which I can't quite get my head around would be, the loss of one of my kids. But I think at the same time, from sort of thinking about it, hearing stories of other different types of grief is like you said, I think, and I hope that what I know it will be, what you're saying will be a huge positive insight for people, is that eventually sort of the pockets of light do appear, and that it sort of you kind of, I suppose, um I don't know how to say it, but sort of, if you can find light in that experience that you went through, and obviously to have you even on the podcast today, and be able to share the story, and to be able to sort of find positives even from that, I think that is such a huge message. And obviously what you started to do is found a purpose bigger than yourself, to try and help other people. And personally, I feel that in I've been talking a lot about this with other friends. I was with a friend the other day who's going through a bit of a rough patch, and that was sort of kind of one of my messages, which I think we're all still trying to work out. What is that bigger mission, or what is that thing outside of myself? But I think if you can, if you can go through that process, which I think every parent is frightened of, and find gratitude in that. I mean, it, what can't you find gratitude in, if you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it definitely. Yeah, listen, I hear you totally, and yeah, I have experienced every parent's worst nightmare, but well, not but, and again, you have to find a positive. I'm blessed with other, fantastic children, other boys, and they deserve light and positivity in their life. This is, we kind of make it up as we go along.
Yeah.
Charlie is not a taboo. We'll talk about him sometimes, and sometimes he comes up in conversation, um, and other times we don't. And that's how it should be. I think. It's not some sort of big taboo or shadow that we can't talk about, but at the same time, they deserve light and positivity and yeah, look, I think and again, I would never tell anybody how to grieve or give anybody advice. I mean, I kind of and we're bombarded these days, by I don't know, personal development, self-help,
Mm.
lifestyle gurus sort of saying everybody should journal, everybody should take an ice bath, everybody should meditate, and where and look, I respect all of those things, and
So,
some,
sorry, just to lighten the mood a bit. I saw a great post the other day where I thought it was brilliant. Where a guy was, he was like, "I sat in an ice bath for 5 minutes, and I haven't got $1 billion company. Like, what's all this crap about?" So,
yeah,
you're right. There is a lot of it out there, isn't there?
yeah, look, and it's all got its merits and it's got its place, but I I come back to like start with the self, examine if there was, and this isn't advice, but because our experiences of life are so personal. So what I would say is what I have found to be broadly true is if you were to if you literally like, and I love simple and things you can scribble on a bit of one bit of paper, piece of paper. Like if you were to sort of go, right, I'm going on a piece of paper, I'm going to sort of do a little bit of a lifestyle and life analysis here. We're all familiar with like 80/20, the 80/20, rule
Mm.
and Pareto's law and such like. And I think quite often, if you were to ask yourself, what's stressing me right now in my life, and what do I really enjoy in my life? Those two questions make two separate lists. Quite often, there'll be 20, we can argue the numbers, but there'll be 20% of things. There'll be a few small things that are causing 80% of your stress and worry and anxiety. And sometimes it might be just a few things that you do that when you do them bring you immense joy, but you don't do them often enough. And it's overly simplistic to say this, but by starting there, it becomes very personal. So what are the things that bring you joy? Not what you should be doing. Not everybody should meditate, everybody should take a nice bath, but
Yeah, I think that's a really
what
good point.
and when you start there, it's real for you. Some people would say, "Oh, I love working with my hands. I never, doing crafts, or I love, knitting, or I love playing my musical instrument, or whatever it is." And pour rocket fuel on that. And the more you get that 20%, the more joy you're going to get. And equally with the stresses, if you start to tackle those big stressors. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about it's something at my job. It's something in my friendships, relationships, or whatever, finances. Or once you've pinpointed it, and then start to take some baby steps towards it, you find that often your anxiety and worry goes down. And how many times do we find it where we're trying to rationally, logically, using that sort of conscious brain, go, what is it? Something's off, something's not right, but you can't pinpoint it. And every time you go, it's not that, it's not that. And you'll do something, you'll change something, or you'll deal with something, and suddenly you feel lighter. You feel like, oh, I feel better. And it was that, but I didn't know it was that, because you didn't quite often when it's going round and round in your head, that is the problem. That's what it's doing. It's going round and round in your head. But when you put it down on paper, and I'm a big believer in the power of the written word, it's like, yeah, that thing that I keep putting off is what, like I haven't updated my will or something, and you think, well, how's that going to change my life? And then you do it and you go, God, that's such a relief. And everything else suddenly is feeling that much better. So
Oh, I completely agree. That really resonates with me actually, and I think it's also a really good. And by the way, when I said that there's a lot of that stuff out there, I actually don't mean that in a cynical way. I mean, I love self improvement, but I think what you've just touched on there is actually a really great practical way of people sort of unpacking the stuff that they're carrying, and it's not easy to do that. I think a lot of people I think one of my um, sort of one of my observations of a lot of the, let's say, the self-help out there is quite easy to listen to it, but not actually then self-reflect and take the action. And I
Mm.
think sometimes there isn't enough of those actually really useful sort of individual, like you've just said, like that kind of little tips or little actual, activities or actions that you can do to actually make a difference on a quite immediate level.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, and I think there's a lot of follow me, isn't there? And hey, look, I have a product and I sell I have a course and I sell it, and I I kind of with those things, and everybody has a right to earn a living and make money. I think, and money is I think a good thing. It's not neither good nor bad. It's just a thing that it's a currency that we need to exist in this world that we live in. And I think in fact money gets a bad press a lot of the time, I think. But um what I would say is those I'm probably straying slightly off topic now. I've got to be really careful. I'm in a glass house with this, but kind of part of it. But I would if you were to sort of be a fly on the wall when I'm doing my sort of content strategy, for example, it would be like um and I nicked this concept from a guy that I follow, like in boxing, jab, 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 right hook.
Oh, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, Vaynerchuk. Yeah,
He's fantastic.
yeah. And I kind of stole. Well, I say stole it. He is someone that you go in and out of people, and you go, oh, I like this guy for a while. I bought his book, I followed him.
Yeah.
But the two that have stayed with all the way through. One is Gary V, and probably the other is Simon Sinek. But
Yeah. Power of why.
yeah, but Gary V, I absolutely love the guy, and I know he's Marmite for some people, and he swears, and but I just his timeless wisdom, and back to jab, 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 right hook, and it's this like give value, give value, give value, give value, and now and again you can go, I've actually got something, and if you'd like to buy it, it's right here. And this is what it is. And if you don't, that's fine. And I go back to give value, give value, give. And I think that ratio, I think I think that's, it's not for me to say whether it's acceptable or not, but I think it's healthy. And I see that. I see Gary Vee do that. He's like giving, giving, giving. And now and again he goes, right, I've got this wine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you text this code, you can buy some, or I've got this V Friends thing or whatever he's got, and I know what he's doing, and he's got a product, and he wants, he's an entrepreneur, and he deserves to make money. And sometimes I'll buy it, and sometimes I'll go, no, I don't want to buy that.
But do you know what as well? And I'm probably segueing a little bit here, but one of the reasons that I love Gary Vee though as well, and I think it touches a lot on what you've already mentioned, is I love the human side to him. Yes, he is a bit brash. There's a bit of language.
Yeah,
Even some of his sort of interviewing methods and techniques can be a little bit sort of garish, and for the Brits it's quite American, and but what I love about him is there's so much compassion, there's so much sort of and I think I love that balance of this isn't all about like the world's really hard and harsh, and it's all got to be like this, but he adds a really really good level of sort of, let's say, human side to everything.
oh, totally. I could talk all day about it. I had the pleasure of meeting him actually when he came to
Oh
London.
wow.
Yeah, it's one of the highlights of my life, actually. Obviously, apart from getting married and having kids, just in case my wife listened to this podcast. But yeah, it was just just a few minutes, but it was amazing. But you're right. And one of the things actually he's, and again, linking it back to everything we're talking about. I mean, I knew Gary Vee before I lost Charlie, so but I used to follow him before. But when he goes into that mode of, when he's doing his like ask,
Yeah, yeah.
well, he used to have a thing. I don't think he does it anymore, but you go, you ask the questions and I answer them. People would phone in with his questions. He's got his speakerphone on his desk, and people phone in and go, yeah, my dad's an alcoholic, or I hate my parents and all this sort of stuff, or this is going on in my life, and he's so, he's going, look, and That's what he'll say. And he'll go,
Yeah.
look, if there's somebody else out there who lost their child or whose parents were alcoholic or were, you know, thrown out of the house or when they were, 16 or whatever, and they made it, you can too. So like don't use that as an excuse to kind of go, well, it's because of this. And that has really helped me, that kind of like, and we don't have to go over it all again, but like losing Charlie was like I'm trying to build a business here and I lost my son and it's really sad. But the truth is the world doesn't care,
It's
So the market doesn't care. And so what?
it's so funny you say that. I actually, without sort of making this about me, I had a big health thing in January, and the hardest thing is that realization is uh it doesn't matter how difficult it is. It doesn't matter how much you might just want to lay in bed because you're feeling tired because of the medication, and obviously running my own business, the world doesn't give a shit. Ultimately, if I don't show up and do what I need to do, no one cares. And I mean, what you must have been going through, that must have been so acute. I mean,
Yeah, that's a very good word, actually. It is acute. And actually with it, it makes me want to sort of go off on a tangent about grief again, which I won't, but it's an acute trauma, yeah. It's an acute trauma. So some people have chronic conditions or chronic abuse or trauma that is prolonged over a period of years, and others have acute, and mine was definitely acute. And yeah, but you're right. At the end of the day, I can remember um, the same summer as my sort of Sainsbury's cafe story, being sat in a different cafe. I used to move around cafes in Chiswick, for a change of scene, as staring into space, really. And I remember watching people, you know, coming in and out of buying frappe lattes in Starbucks and people complaining about the Wi-Fi being slow in the cafe, and you'd think, no, you don't you understand? Why are you complaining about that? That's not important. And why are you buying stuff? Like, why are you just carrying on like this? Don't you realize that Charlie's died? Don't you realize that what's happened? Everything should stop. Everything should be different now. And you realize very quickly life carries on and people still go to Starbucks and they still complain about the Wi-Fi and they still complain about, I don't know, the dishwasher doesn't do the plates properly. And then sometimes you do have to take a step back and go, bloody hell, we are so lucky. We are so great. Be grateful. Back to your point earlier, I sort of didn't really pick up on it, but gratitude is a real thing. It's a real thing. And we all need heavy doses of it sometimes, and reminding of that, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, we should all practice it more, shouldn't we? Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack in this conversation. I just, yeah. I mean, I thank you for coming on and being so open and honest. It is a taboo subject. I think we've funnily enough, bizarrely, prior to this conversation this morning, we were talking about doing a special on grief, weren't we? I was
Yeah.
with a friend last night who's just very sadly lost his dad, and obviously you expect in the natural progression of things, parents and grandparents, that's the natural course. But obviously losing a child before you is, I mean, having two kids myself, I just don't even know where to begin with that. So the fact that you're able to come on and talk about it, and Mark, is really admirable, and the way you've coped with it, and how you're channeling your energies now is just remarkable, really. So thank you for coming on, being so open and honest with it. I had a couple of things just as you've been talking today, that which I thought was quite interesting. Well, you mentioned people at the beginning of the podcast. You're very much a people person. That's very apparent since I've known you. And you made a couple of decisions really very quickly within 5 minutes. I think when you said you chatted to Edwina, you knew within 5 minutes, and then you chatted to the coaching lady,
Yeah.
you did that within 5 minutes. You when you buy into the person that connects with you, you make those instinctive decisions pretty quickly, from the sounds of it, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I think that we all make two decisions when it comes to many things, actually, like purchasing things or relationships, or I saw it in sales. You kind of go, there's an emotional decision first, before the kind of, whatever you want to call it, the formal contract or the transaction, or the, it's whether it's dating or signing a contract for something. It's like buying a house. You walk in, you hear it a lot, don't you? You go, yeah, we
You
knew
get
this.
instinct, yeah.
That's a real thing. I think that happens. And look, listen, it's a pleasure to come on. And interestingly, we haven't talked about fitness at all. And it's which is the beauty of these podcasts, is that you sort of you can go off, and we've covered a lot of topics. But I do, if we're wrapping up, I do really want to leave it on a positive. And I appreciate grief is quite a heavy subject, but there's so much. So again, no advice to anybody, but if there was a message, it's like there's so much to go for, there's so much to live for. And actually, this thing that's happened to you, whatever it is in your life, if anyone listening to this has been through any kind of trauma or just struggling with anything, there's always a way. And sometimes that way will come from the most unexpected place. And, it's I finished this story, and actually I didn't plan to do this, but I've got this written up on my board and I'm staring at it now. I've got there's about sort of 7 or 8 quotes that I sort of live by, and this one's not mine. I nicked it. I got this from, I can't even remember the person's name now, but it's called Man on the Moon, and just believe it. We're all so capable of so much. We really are. And just, sometimes I say to it, say yes to that coffee. Obviously we have to protect ourselves. You can't say yes to everything. But sometimes every now and again, it's just a good thing to do, just to explore and be curious about things without necessarily there having to be a specific outcome attached. And you never know what's around the corner, and we're all capable of so much. And the Man on the Moon is, if you take yourself back, well, it was before any of us were born. So, but and I'm probably subconsciously somewhat. I went to the cinema at the weekend and watched a film called Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson, and so maybe that's subconsciously ran on my mind about the moon. But at the beginning of the 60s. Obviously, Kennedy stood up and challenged America to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And I always sort of think, imagine being in the room when that idea was first mooted. And can you imagine how, cynical some people might, like, man on the moon, are you having a laugh? You're like, it's never going to happen. It's, we're just never going to do that. No one's ever done it. It was almost like, even now, that's quite a big thing, and this was like early 60s, and he challenged everybody to do it. And when you think of like when they landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong, it's 1969. TVs are black and white, cars are rubbish, there's no computers, and yet they put a man on the moon. And you think, that's incredible. That is incredible. And they kept believing, and they kept, building, and despite all the setbacks and all the failures, they bloody did it. And I still think, even now, like now, to put if there was a moon landing now, it would attract massive attention, and it's such a big thing. And so I would say to people, what's your man on the moon? What's your man on the moon for 2025 or 2030? And because I think a lot of us overestimate what we can achieve in a year. There's lots of this stuff around New Year's resolutions or this time next year. And a year it's a long time, but it's a short time. But you can do a lot in 2 years. And I think people so they overestimate what you can do in a year, but they underestimate what you can do in 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. And so I'd say to people, what's your man on the moon? And, put your flag in and go, that's my man on the moon. And if it feels almost impossible, if it feels scary and a little bit like, how can I possibly do that, but exciting, you're probably in the right place. and just it's all to play for. And we're here. And if you're on this side of the ground like we are, and you're living and breathing and listening to this podcast, you've already won. You know, you're here, because loads of people aren't. So just go for it.
Amazing.
That's what I'd say.
I love that. What a great message. And interesting enough, Mark, we usually finish the podcast with the same question. And I think you've just answered that question before I've even asked to do it, which is, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself one piece of advice based on everything we've talked about today, what that might be. I think what's your man on the moon is a brilliant answer to that question.
It would just be, you're enough, Mark. You're enough. You know, just believe in yourself. You know, because I probably didn't at that time. So that's the advice. You know, I was too insecure. I was too worried about what people thought, and you know, that kind of thing. And I'd just say, Mark, you're enough already. Just take the shackles off and believe, and go for what you know. It's going to be hard work. I'm in danger of giving far too long an answer now. So the short answer is just believe in yourself, and you're enough.
Amazing. And I mean, I feel we've done you a bit of a disservice here, because we've had so much to talk about, and we haven't even got on to, you know, really what you're doing now, and gone into too much.
Okay, that's
too much depth. So I think what I'd certainly love to do is you know, do another podcast if we can, because I think this has been so incredible, but I feel like we've got so much more to cover, but we've obviously got to be respectful of time. And you know, if that's all right, I think it'd be great if we could do another one.
I'd love to, Mark, if you're willing. I mean,
listen, I'd love to. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember. I don't know if your parents had this, but the Beatles had two. For years, there were two albums of the greatest hits. There was the red one and the blue one. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And the red one was all the old stuff. And the blue one was all the new stuff. So I think we've done the red album.
The blue one was post LSD, wasn't
it? Yeah. So maybe we'll do a blue album podcast.
Mark, if you're up for that, I would love to do that, because
listen, I'd be delighted, and obviously I'm hugely passionate about it, but I came on with an open mind, and it's just been a beautiful conversation. So
and you're the reason for that, and we're so grateful that you came on, and we're so open and able to talk to us about lots of very difficult things that have happened, and lots of very positive things that have happened as well, Mark. So I think that for anyone listening, that have taken so much from that. So thank you for being so transparent and so honest. And like Adam said, I think we'd love to dig more into the fitness stuff and all the cool stuff you're doing with your business, and because I think that's really important as well. But I'd like to spend more time doing that. But thank you so much. It's been great catching up with you, and after all this time, and you know, filling us in on the stuff that you've been up to since. So
yeah, that's a pleasure. You probably have to give people probably a bit of space after I've been talking for over an hour, but before we do the next one. But no, listen, I'd love to, and you're welcome, and it's been a pleasure. It's been really great talking to you guys. So
I think thank you. And just to finish from my side, Mark, I hope it doesn't sound in any way contrived or anything, but I think you're a real inspiration, and a real hero. So you know, I'm so grateful to hear your story, and to be honest, it's going to take some processing, I think, actually, you know, just to hear how much of a great guy you are. I hope we can meet in person as well, but yeah, I'm not articulating it very well, but I'm really, really grateful to be able to talk to you.
Listen, well, firstly, we must meet up, definitely. And look, I never used to be very good at receiving compliments, but you're very kind, and I'll thank you for your kind words, is all I'll say. And to sort of bring it right back to something you said, I think possibly before we started recording today, you know, if this helps one person, then, you know, if someone listening to this goes, I like that bit, I'm going to use that bit, then amazing.
I'm sure there will be, Mark. Take care of yourself, Mark, and we'll look forward to getting another date in, and we'll pick up on part 2.
Wonderful. Look forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Wait, I think I'm starting to fade again. I don't want the end.